Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. In this topic, I want to look at and talk about how important it is for you personally to get rid of the SNP, because it's quite a emotive subject and it's quite a simple way of doing it. All right. Now, my beliefs are, in my campaign through this election period, is very, very simple. I want people to tactically vote, which in turn can get rid of as many SNP MPs as possible, which will affect their income massively. And then repeat that process for the next Holyrood election. And I believe that if that's done successfully by the Scottish Electorate, we could not only get rid of them from their positions of power, but we could also bankrupt them forevermore. And that is what is driving me over the next 4 or 5 weeks of what's left of this campaign, and what will drive me until we have a Holyrood election, whether that be in 2 years' time or earlier if the SNP make an arse of being in government. We might see it happening earlier than normal. So, this whole thing about tactically voting is quite an emotive subject, and I understand that. And I understand that a lot of people are dying the wool blue or dying the wool red. I appreciate that and I respect that. And I don't want to come across as somebody who is banging their fist on the table and telling you what to do with your vote, because that's not my job. What I'm trying to do is explain to you what I've decided to do in the hope that you'll listen, consider, and make your own decision. And I hope that the decision would be to do as I am about to do, not do as I say. That's a different thing. Okay. So, why is it important? Now, it's simple mathematics or arithmetic, as if you would like. That if you will not take anything into consideration other than your preconceived normal voting habits, you could be voting for a party to become third or lower in the ranking once the election results are called. Now, if that's the case and the winner was not SNP, well, that's fine. We've just got lucky. But if the SNP were to win your seat in your constituency that you live in, and your party of choice came third, if you simply added the votes of the second and third place and it was higher than the SNP achieved itself, then your inability to tactically vote has in turn caused the SNP to gain a seat or retain a seat, whatever the case may be. So that's why tactical voting is it's a doable strategy, and it can achieve great things. But only if you will accept the actual theory. And I will not fall out with anybody who can't. Let me just put that out there. But a lot of the things I hear and the objections for not doing any tactical voting are plentiful. And I'll try and cover some of them in this short video. First thing is, I can't vote for Anas Sarwar, for example. I don't like Anas Sarwar. Well, that's fine. You're allowed your opinion on anybody. However, I need to remind you that this election coming up at the start of July is for Westminster, not Holyrood. So you are not voting for Anas Sarwar. Another objection I have is people say, well, I don't want Keir Starmer to be the Prime Minister. I have a reality check for you on this one. He will be, right? If he is not the Prime Minister come the 5th of July, once the votes are counted, then we have had to have witnessed one of the biggest turnarounds in electoral history, because it ain't happening. The only people that could beat them and put their Prime Minister in is Conservative, and they are so far off the mark right now that is not going to happen. So you've then got to think, if you're one of these people, I can't vote for Starmer, well, he's going to be in anyway. So your vote, to a certain degree on that question, does not matter. So you may as well use your vote to try and get the second most important thing I would like to think in your head, and that is getting rid of the SNP. because this can be done. Now, one of the reasons it's so important, the SNP have spent more money than they've brought in over the last 2 financial periods that they have reported, and they have a new set of accounts out any time now. The vast majority, or a big chunk of their income, is through what we call short money and what they call ministerial levy. Now, these are 2 charges, one that they get from Westminster to run a party in opposition, and the other is from their MPs, who give them a portion of their wages back, like a donation. Every one of them. Putting those 2 together is something like 1.2 million for the short money and about 400-500 grand for this levy. It's in their accounts. Google them. They'll back up exactly what I'm saying. So if we as an electorate could get them to no seats, it's just, I suppose it's possible, but it's highly improbable, I would imagine, they would lose about 1.6 to 1.8 million pounds of income for a thing, an organisation that's losing money hand over fist already. So you can see how important this is. So if your driver is like mine, my pure driver here is to get rid of the SNP and potentially bankrupt them, I would vote for a donkey if it helped that thing, because it's easy for me to say for 2 reasons. One, my main driver in this election is to rid Westminster of as many SNP MPs as possible and bankrupt them. But the other reason it's easy for me is through my adult life, I've voted for 3 different parties. I have voted Labour, I've voted Tory, I've voted Liberal Democrat in the past. So it's quite easy for me. I can understand why some people might have difficulty in doing it. But you just have to lay out your own priorities in this election and go with it. And if your priority is get rid of the SNP, then you just have to tactically vote. It's as simple as that. There's another thing came in. Reform's been a question and a part of this equation for a wee while, and a short amount. But it's became a bigger thing yesterday because Nigel Farage has now made himself a leader and is standing for election in Clacton, down in the south coast. Now that will have a knock-on effect to some people's way of thinking who may or may not see reform as a worthwhile option to vote for. Voting for reform in Scotland, I'm no anti or pro reform. My nirvana in the future would to have particularly a Scottish Parliament, if we've still got one, that's got a bigger, wider mix of parties and a bigger, wider mix of ideas, so we see a more centralised thing on any decisions that it makes, right? So going forward in the future, having some reform people on Scottish Parliament is the end of it all to me. I don't think it's a bad thing. But right now, it is not a good thing, right? For the simple fact there are a few seats. Now, reform will take votes off majority of the time Conservatives, but there is an understanding that they might take some Labour voters as well. No, maybe as much, but some. And there are some constituents in Glasgow, there's about 6 or 7, where the latest polls show a 1% difference in how those seats would go. And one of them was, which could be a Conservative win. Can't remember. It'll come back to me. Now, and in that particular poll, I think they were gauging about 4 or 5% for reform. So if any of the votes, because of what happened with Farage, if that's going to make a difference to anybody, and any reform percentage was to go up even slightly, then the probability is it would come off the Tory. They would then lose a seat, and instead of being blue, it would be yellow. And it is possible because there's about 5 seats that are sort of 1% differences between Labour and SNP. So that could be enough if even there was a small increase in votes for reform, and even bearing in mind that the small percentage of them would be off Labour supporters, it could lose some Labour seats by taking and stealing some voters off of them. So the whole reform thing, although it's a party that I don't have any bad feelings for, totally fine with the concept of the reform being a party in Scotland, that doesn't bother me. But what it does, I think it's fair to suggest they'll not win a single seat in Scotland. That's no baloney. That's just me dealing with facts here. So somebody voting for them is nothing else, another than a sort of stroking the ego of Nigel Farage. Now, if you want to do that, and that is stroking Nigel Farage's ego is more important than getting rid of the SNP, then fine, go and stroke Nigel Farage's ego. But I'm more concerned about getting rid of the SNP. So I think it's a bad thing. I think if everybody made a decision in every constituency and said, I want to get rid of the SNP, who am I best voting for? And we all voted in mass, those that don't want the SNP wouldn't have a seat. That's a mathematical fact, right? Because they don't have a 50% of the vote in any area at all. It's highly improbable that that's going to happen. So what we need to try and do is, for those who are buying into this theory of tactical voting, they need to just take the pill. Just say, do you know what? Now, it might be that whoever you need to vote for in Tory seats that they could win, you might be Tory, so it's easy for you to do and like flip the vast majority of seats that we need to try and sort out are ones that Labour can win, and there might be a lot of Labour voters there anyway, so these things will happen. But I do see a lot of real illogical pushback on even people considering the notion of tactical voting. And I also see a lot of people just throwing up on social media, just voting for them for like no particular reason at all, other than stroking Farage's ego and voting reform. It will not make any difference to A, getting rid of the SNP, A, winning a seat for reform in Scotland, or B, making Nigel Farage the next Prime Minister, because that ain't going to happen either, right? So, voting reform in Scotland, unfortunately, and I hate saying this because I quite like the notion of lots of different parties getting lots of different votes when the time is right, and that time is not now. So, voting reform in Scotland is really, it's having no positive whatsoever in any of the outcomes that are going to happen in this election, other than the person who voted for him feeling good in themselves and going, aha, I voted reform because I'm a bit different. They won't win a seat and Farage won't be the Prime Minister, so it has got no benefit to anybody, again, apart from stroking Farage's ego. So if that's your consideration, I want to vote reform, I get that, I understand that, and I would like you to consider what you're actually doing and the possible consequences of your actions. And I would like everybody to consider what their true objective is. From an election that's already been, the outcome is already decided, right? There is, Labour are going to win it, and Labour are going to have Keir Starmer as their, you might not like that, he's going to be the Prime Minister, you might not want that, but we don't always get what we want. So the outcome's already decided. So now we as Scottish Electorate have to decide what we are going to do with our vote. And I would hope that most people, and that's not just unionists, it's nationalists as well, we've had enough of them, will go, well, seeing as I'm not going to influence who's going to be Prime Minister, I may as well influence what's going to happen in Scotland going forward. And you could vote and sort this out in 4 weeks' time and protect Scotland from the SNP forever. That's the harsh reality of it. So, if you have enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing. And most importantly of all, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.